Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Whether you're getting started with your very first dental practice or you already have a practice and are ready to take that step to the next level, there's only one place to go: expansion. So maybe acquiring your first or even another practice has been on one of the goals of yours for 2017, and maybe you're not quite there yet, but regardless, knowing how to navigate the often turbulent waters of practice acquisition is a critical skill to build a thriving practice now and for many years to come. Many consultants believe that the future of dentistry is larger practices. And that's why today I'm so excited to share my conversation with Dr. Hunter Smith, who is the owner of the Southern Dental Group. What he's been able to do at the young age of 28 is nothing short of amazing. You may remember him from episode 38 of the Start Your Dental Practice podcast, where he talked about his process of how he was able to acquire 5 practices. And in a really short time since we've last talked, he's actually acquired even another practice and has positioned himself to continue to invest in his future while sharing what he's learned along the way. Even if you're not ready to acquire a practice yet, I know you'll get a ton out of our conversation today. So here are just a few things you're going to learn. How Hunter is able to acquire a practice nearly every quarter, when you should consider acquiring a practice and when you should not, why acquiring your first practice is the hardest part of your practice growth, why growing from the first practice to the second practice can be the hardest part of becoming a multi-practice owner, the double effort myth when it comes to acquiring a new practice, the chicken before the egg mistake and how to avoid it, and finally, a critical element, how to handle staff transition during the acquisition process. And at the end of the episode, you'll also get a chance to learn more about the Dental Ownership Summit, a fantastic event that will help you take your practice to the next level. So be sure to listen all the way through this entire interview to learn more. Now, here's my interview with Dr. Hunter Smith. Hello, ambitious dentists. Today, I have the pleasure to interview one of my favorite stories in the world. This guy is 28 years old, owns not 5 but 6 dental practices. I believe the last time I had him on the show, he only owned 5. Now he's actually got 6. I have with us again Dr. Hunter Smith from Jonesboro, Arkansas, with Southern Dental Group. So, Dr. Smith, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, so Dr. Smith, since the last time you came on, you've added another practice, and I've had gotten some different feedback and questions about your story since you've came on, and so I thought it'd be a really good time for us to be able to kind of talk through those things, and you give some of your advice to the people that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we grew by 1 since the last time we spoke. For maybe the first year or so that we were really going after this, we added a practice about every quarter. So for the first 5 or 6 quarters of our partnership, myself and Dr. Will Little here in Jonesboro with me, we added 1 per quarter. Our last purchase practice was in August of last year. So we took the 4th quarter of 2016 off, and we're working on a few projects now at the beginning of 2017.
Just taking it easy, just coasting through life right now, then, huh? So tell me, one of the most common questions I get, and we can kind of just piggyback off of our last conversation a bit, but like one of the most common questions I get from my current practice owners, and again, you took not just the path less taken, you went through the path less taken on a backhoe and just went back and forth on it on a 4-wheeler and all these other things. So from your perspective, when is, for the people out there that own, just a very successful single practice office, and they're at capacity effectively, or they believe they're at capacity, when is the time for them to actually say, okay, I'm going to go start a new practice. And the reason I'm asking this is because I always hear the people that go from 1 to 2 for some reason, it seems like that's almost more of a difficult transition than having that 5th or 6th or 7th one. Have you spoken with other people in regards to that? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The hardest transition is from 1 to 2. There's different levels. 1 to 2 being the first time multi-practice owner is a new experience, new challenges. Then getting above 3, when you go from 3 to 4, especially if you're solo, I'm fortunate enough to have a partner in all of this to take a lot of the pressure off that allowed us to scale a little bit more quickly. But once you get past 3, you're really starting to get spread thin with just one individual. And then you need to look into different strategies on how your clinical time is going to be. And then also when we're the stage that we're at now, obviously it's the first time I've experienced this stage, but once you get to about 6, 7, 8, depending on the practice sizes, you run into new roadblocks in terms of scaling not the clinical entities, but the administrative layers, the DSO type layer, if you want to call it that. That admin layer really takes a lot of capital. It really takes a lot of time. It really takes really good HR and hiring and firing to run real efficiently so that you can start delegating some of those tasks that you were so used to doing all on your own and doing it 100%, but now you don't have time. So there's different levels of growing multiple practices and scaling them larger that present new challenges. But yeah, absolutely. 1 to 2 is, because it is just a brand new type of journey, is a definitely hard step.
So if you were going to be someone and again, the reason I'm speaking to in general terms is because I find that the practice owner who feels like they're being successful, they're doing well with that singular practice, how do they make that jump to the second practice? Like, how do they say, okay, I'm doing well, my numbers all make sense, and it's time for me to expand. And they go out and, for example, they buy a new practice. People's mindset usually says, okay, I'm going to buy another practice. That means my work has to officially double. Do you find that to be the same? What is your thoughts on that?
No. And honestly, I get the reverse, which really it doesn't frustrate me, but it worries me because I get a lot of never owners, new grads, still dental school students, and then maybe 1 or 2 first time owners really early in their practice life that come to me and want to know about multiple practices. And I get worried because that really shouldn't be the goal. In my opinion, it certainly wasn't ours. I mean, I know we grew really, really fast, but we bought the second practice, as you know, from our last show, to get busier clinically. So we weren't doing it to grow our business necessarily. So I get really nervous when I start hearing guys that have never owned practices or that don't have an experience as a clinician first start talking about scaling into multiple practices or that being a goal while they're in dental school or before. Not saying that it shouldn't be, on a radar long-term goal, but that's definitely putting the chicken before the eggs kind of thing, in terms of what you should focus on first and foremost. But to more specifically answer your question on when these whether it's a double or anything like that, absolutely not. What you need to understand when you go from that first practice to that capacity that's humming, that's going, that's making you a lot of money, is you're valuing your time at that point, because when you're at capacity, 1 hour for you has a dollar value. And if you're giving up that time to pursue other interests, then you need to understand that you're giving up financial for time, which you hope can have a return on investment at another level. So when you're scaling from 1 to 2, especially if you're bringing on an associate, especially if it's a junior associate, especially if you're cutting days back in your practice to do the second location and work it clinically, you absolutely should plan on a drop in income for basically as long as it takes to show that return on investment of the time that you've given up. So it's not, I got one practice doing $1 million, I go open a second one and it does $1 million and now I do $2 million. It's more like I got a practice doing $1 million. I'll bring in a junior associate that suddenly does $750. I'm trying to get another practice to do at least 250 to even break even on my time. And if I do more than that, then I get a positive return on investment. But it is not a 1-for-1 ratio time money for sure.
So if you were a single practice owner and you were looking at that second one, just knowing what you know now about having more than one practice, what would you recommend the type of practice be that person go out and get? And I know that probably depends on the strengths of the current owner, the person that's looking. But just in your regard, would you look for? Because I get these guys all the time. People want to buy a $400,000 practice. People want to buy a 700. People want to buy $1 million. People want to buy a group. Like they have all these different sights on what it is they want to purchase. So like what would you say would be the most the best use of that time that you are giving up as far as from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that brings up another point. One thing that you need before I would encourage anybody to transition into multiple practice ownership is you need a tool in your bag there that is different, that sets you apart clinically. So for instance, in our case, when we bought the second practice, we could add molar endo, we could add invisible braces, we can now add real braces, we can add implants to that location to make better use of our time in that location. If you're a bread and butter dentist doing crowns and fillings and extractions, your time, obviously, if you give up those procedures and that's all you can add to the table, you're not able to add any profitable referred procedures to your second location. So I think you got to have one or two of those in the pocketbook before you expand out, and that's something that you can add to those practices that you're evaluating for your second location. In terms of size, I think it's important to note that one of the first things that we ask ourselves before we take on a new location is how we're going to replace the doctor production. Is there an associate in place? Can we easily add an associate to place? If we do add a new associate into place, can they reproduce the production of either the selling doctor or ourselves, depending on where they're going? I've seen some instances of really, really big practices that we had to pass on because we can't replace the doctor if he or she leaves. So there's not a number I can give you that it's $400,000 practice, $700,000 practice. It's just a practice that you can recruit a dentist to that you feel comfortable being able to replace that level of production. That's why hygiene is super important in multiple practices, because ideally those providers stay, so that amount of hygiene is in place and it's going to stay in place. And you just need to replace the doctor, which may be, say, if it's 700,000, it may be 600,000 of it, or it may be 400,000 of it. And those are obviously two very, very different practices in terms of an absentee model owner. So there's not really a number I can give you. You just want to be able to replace that doctor production and add new procedures to get a higher return on your investment for that second location.
It's such a good point. I spoke with someone, actually, I believe you may know them. I think they were a year younger than you in school. Was Dr. Sullivan. I spoke to him this last weekend, and he said that he started to work with his dad, and they'd never done implants before, and in the first year of introducing implants, they did 107 implants in the first year. It's just like, is that not like just by adding that service to their procedure mix? It's like, is that not just an amazing, just like that? If you could just buy something for, like you said, like a $700,000 practice that does $1 million a year, and you add, $450,000 of revenue based off of one service, that's pretty earth shattering. So you brought up another point, which was something I really, really wanted to pick your brain on. And so I'm glad we got you on the line for it, so I can put you on the spot. You talked about hygiene. And as most people know, the hygiene program is, to me, the hygiene program is really hard for me to get clients to be able to turn around. And the reason being is because it is forcing the owner doctor to lead those hygienists in a certain way. And a lot of the times, a lot of doctors don't want to lead those hygienists in that specific way in order to be able to increase hygiene revenue. So, for example, in a lot of the practices that we look at, we typically see perio procedures being billed out about 3 to 5% of all hygiene patients. Like that's just like if they are not doing anything but just doing bloody prophies, like that's all that that's the only thing they're doing perio on. If it's anything more than that, then that to me triggers saying they've got somebody actually pushing perio in that practice. But I would say 80% of practices are in that 3 to 5, maybe up to 8% of patients that are going through the hygiene program are actually on perio. How do you get those practices to turn around? Because I know that's something that you guys do and you do it very well.
Yeah, that goes back to what we really pride ourselves on being able to do in transitioning practices is know when and how different things are important to add and not add to a practice. In my opinion, perio is not a low-hanging fruit, if you want to call it that, of turning around a hygiene department.
Yeah, that's an uphill battle, to say the least, for most practices.
It really is, and it's hard with, like you said, it's hard with hygienists. Honestly, this sounds kind of cold, but if you're wanting to be a multiple practice owner and you're not able to look in the eye of the hygienist of the practices that you're buying and basically be ready to let them go and to find a new spot, then you're not ready for multiple practice ownership, because some of those people have been doing it for so long that they can't see the vision that you're trying to add to the practice. So they just can't be part of your team. It's not that they've done anything wrong necessarily. It's just that they're not a good fit.
How often in your acquisition experience do you have to have that conversation with the hygienist?
We've been extremely lucky, and they've really turned around maybe once or twice, maybe once actually that I can remember. We've been very lucky on hygienists taking pay changes well. When that would have kind of been the deal breaker for us, we more shift the pay than we do try to free up time, if that makes sense. If we got hygienists that are overpaid, we change the way they're paid and incentivize them through production goals rather than just let them go on the front end. So, as you know, we're early in this multiple practice gig ourselves, so I don't have all the answers here, but we've not had a lot of issues with hygienists really taken on, as long as you properly train them and educate them on why you're doing certain things. And if they buy in, then it's going to be successful. But back to the perio thing, that's not a real low-hanging fruit, especially in the first year transition, and especially in a practice that you're buying with long-standing patients who've been going there for 30 and 40 years, and it's not a really new patient-heavy practice. If you try to get that practice to 30% hygiene, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because it's just not how that practice is ran. You don't want to go in there and 1 to 3 everybody in your existing patient base. More so what you're trying to do is establish a periodontal criteria with your staff on something that you all agree, and it's primarily the doctor's responsibility to spell this out on what periodontal disease is. So then you do the 6-point probings, and then you do all that stuff on new patients and start educating on your new patients. And then obviously you're more aware of it on your existing patients, where you can show them and educate them through intraoral cameras, through digital x-rays, through perio charting, about any issues they may have. But, I personally see this more taking practices from 5% perio, to maybe 15 in the first year. If it's a decently, 20-ish new patients a month practice. You're not trying to get that national average 33% or whatever, or even worse. I've heard some people say, well, 60% of adults have it, so 60% of your patient base should.
Right. So, yeah. I've seen a lot of practices, especially a lot of practices in Arkansas, and I've yet to see one anywhere close to that. So.
Yeah. So that's not a real low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. It's not something that's a focus. I think there's more of a focus in hygiene on taking proper radiographs, presenting fluoride, which is ADA research through the gills on being beneficial, sealants, especially on children, if you are okay with the research that's presented on adult sealants. And then, good products such as, electric toothbrushes, making night guards for people with lots of crowns. That kind of stuff is the low hanging fruit of hygiene production, and not necessarily starting to perio treat every one of your existing new patients. So.
Yeah, it's funny how many doctors, when I had that conversation about fluoride with them, I said, do you believe in adult fluoride? And they're all just like, yeah, I 100% believe it's a benefit to the patient. And I say, well, only 1 out of every 16 people that come through your practice actually receive that treatment. And then, it's like, I mean, that's like the definition of leading someone to do something. So, okay. Well, you mentioned in there talking about changing the hygiene pay. This is just as much an interview about acquiring practices as it is about multi-practice ownership. But whenever you're acquiring that practice, do you approach that pay change prior to the acquisition? Is that a part of due diligence, or is that something you have to try and do after the papers are signed?
It's after, in my experience. It's going to change situation to situation, I think, because lots of owner doctors are very, very close knit on selling their practices. Non-disclosure agreements with the staff and with us on presenting it to the staff. Sometimes they don't know till the day of the sale that it's been sold. So it's not really always something that you can present in advance. In our case, it's always been after the very first meeting, though. In almost all acquisitions that I've ever heard of, and definitely in all of ours, the very last thing that the senior doctor, the selling doctor, does is fire the staff. They are no longer employed by anybody. They can then agree to accept the same terms, different terms, blah, 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 for the new owners, but there is no requirement from either side to hire the old staff or for them to stay on at any changes. So the last act, and then in that first meeting that we have together, the staff is letting know that there's been a sale and that they are essentially fired from the practice because that practice no longer exists, but that the buyer, in our case, and almost every time, we have wanted to keep on all the same staff. There's been a few instances where we've had to let a few people go at the beginning, but they want to stay on, and they're going to present new terms to see if it's something they can work under.
Who usually delivers that message? The old doc or you? And are you guys in the same room? Is that conversations going on?
We split it into department after that first. The initial conversation is with the selling doctor, kind of telling we if they're comfortable, wanting to tell that there's been a sale, that they've enjoyed working with them for all these years, blah blah blah. Pat them on the behind to tell them they did a good job, and then let them know that they're no longer the owner, and then whatever their plans are. And then we step in and say that, we love to keep everybody. We bought the practice for how it was and because we think it can be really successful. So there are going to be some changes, but we wanted to meet with them about those changes to make sure it worked. And then we'll go department by department, usually front desk, hygiene and assistants all together, unless there's an individual change that needs to be made.
So whenever you're doing that, so I get the hygiene side of things. How hard is it to transition over the front office side of things? I mean, that you could go onto Dental Town and literally look up probably 3,000 recommendations on how to do every single thing that's done in the front office in a dental practice. So we've seen that a lot of legacy employees, they really like the way that they're doing it because they, maybe that is the way they do it to where they get the maximum dollars or maximum pay for what that's the least number of things they have to do in a day if they do it that way, or they're just resistant to change of like using technology and things like that. I mean, how do you approach that whenever you've got, say, mid-50s age woman who's resistant to technology? I mean, that's how do you guys go about that?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. Dental Town they go a little bit, and I mean this in a nice way, over the top with literally everything in terms of how efficient you need to be in the different areas. The good thing about our profession is and this job or dentistry as a business, is the margins are huge. If you buy the right practice and you got a good price, you got a little wiggle room for some change in that early session, early transition.
I don't know, man. I know a bunch of people that went broke buying too much paper.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, it's just they're resistant, but not as much as, not too bad in our experience. A lot of them are so nervous that there's going to be change in terms of their employment that it's really refreshing when we want to keep everybody and work together. Almost every change that we make is more efficient, just from doing it. If we change practice management softwares to Open Dental, it's just better than SoftDent or EagleSoft or whatever we change from. So it's there's a 2-week transition where no one knows what button to press, but then it's like, oh, this is more streamlined. This is better. Or text reminders as opposed to calling every patient. Or filing insurance instead of mailing out every paper claim and stamping it, we do it electronically. So there's a lot of our processes are more streamlined. So there's less work almost after they get used to it, to the point that we've not had a lot of resistance in those changes. And again, that goes back to just knowing when to change stuff. And what's important during the early transition, what's important during the late transition, and then what can you really, really improve to get a small margin, but you're running at maximum capacity in other areas. So now you can start tinkering with these very minute return on investment items.
The things you just talked about are like the specific answers that I wish that I had specific experience on going through of making these changes for, because I get these questions, it seems like all the time, as far as like, how do I approach these people about these types of things? And these are just the types of things you can't learn without physically going through them yourself, or, assisting someone going through them yourself. As a CPA, we help people with the asset allocation. We help them come up with a price for being able to figure out how much to pay. We help them with the negotiations. We help them for setting up their accounting software, setting up the payroll software, and all those little things that come along with it. But the person to person, like the new doctor or the practice owner, having these conversations with people and actually implementing these changes, it's very, very different than, say, setting up a chart of accounts for somebody. So I appreciate how open you have been with all of these things.
Well, I think, and I hate to even say this because I feel like it's going to get taken to somewhere else, but a lot of this really, really does boil down to good leadership. And I don't want it to make it seem like you got to go take all these leadership courses or try to pump you up and all this stuff. But, you need to be able to be a normal person and look these people in the eye and tell them that you're changing for this reason, that this is expected because of this reason. And you need to be confident in the changes that you're making. If you don't believe in the changes that are being made, then why are you making them? And if you can't present that information, then you don't know enough about it. So a lot of it does go back to just being able to be a normal human being and be personable and explain yourself and where you're headed so that people can get on board. I mean, if you're calling in these hygiene girls and you're about to alter their pay and your head's down and you're like, oh, you're going from $40 to $25 an hour, blah, 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 blah. Okay, thanks, do you so want to stay? You're obviously going to get a lot different reaction than if you say, hey, your base pay is going to change because of the level of production the practice is at now. As opposed to cut hygiene days, as opposing to cutting your hours, I would prefer to change your pay to a different structure where you're benefited if the practice does really well and you potentially have the ability to make more money than, just have to let you go. Does that sound something reasonable, something we can work out? You see the difference? I mean, just not even, that may not even be leadership so much as it's communication, but they kind of go hand in hand. But you're going to get such a different response depending on how you do this. And I talked to a lot of people they're like, well, I don't want to change the way my hygienists pay. They've been like this for 20 years. Like, well, okay, well, you just spent $700,000 on a practice. You got to make the loan payment. Are you going to borrow money from her? I mean, so you got to take control a little bit and be confident and be sure of the decisions that you're making, or it's not going to work. Whether you got one practice or whether you got 10. So.
Sure. So in order to be able to be confident of these things, and so for a lot of people that a lot of people only acquire one practice in their lifetime, but many people acquire, maybe they sell that one, they move to another town, they acquire another one, or they try and go the multi-practice ownership route. How do they figure out what will work if they've never done it before?
Yeah, that's a good question. My answer is that you always should, and something I really push, is that you should learn from people who've done it the way that you want to do it. You can read 3 different answers on Dental Town from 3 different people who do a really good job and probably have success doing it that way. But, in my case, I had mentors. I had Dr. Costas, and I had Dr. Luna, and I had Dr. Ferran, and I listened to these people and the way that they communicated and the systems that they put in place. And that's what I wanted to imitate with my practices. That's what I wanted my practices to look and feel like. So I trusted in their knowledge and in their systems, and then you implement over time, and you're confident and you're sure that it's going to work, but you're not so egotistical that if it doesn't work for your practice that you pull it off or that you pull out of that. So again, it's learn from the right people. Don't try to do everything at once. Really research the changes that you want to make and have good reasons for making them, and then go in with confidence and go in with, the assurance that if your staff gets behind it, that it's going to work. And if it doesn't, then you hey guys, made a mistake. We're going to pivot here. This didn't work for our practice for whatever reason, so we're going to back off of that and look for other ways to be successful. So
I love it. And so, if you didn't catch that, guys, he talked about Dr. Scott Luna from Breakaway Practice Seminars, someone who arguably has more startup experience than most people in this world. Dr. Mark Costas, who is one of the biggest students and teachers of dental entrepreneurship in the world, as well as Howard Ferron, Dr. Howard Ferron, the person who started Dental Town, who is just a wealth of information. He did his old dental MBA. He's always been a jet setter, pioneer. And so I don't know if you guys know this, but Dr. Smith and all the guys I just mentioned, like the dream team of dental education, are actually going to be having a course that you guys can attend. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Dr. Smith?
Absolutely. So basically what that was a good lead-in question. I don't know if you did it on purpose or not, but it's a good lead-in question.
I learned that from the podcast interview summit the dental podcast summit we just went to. You got to segue things every once in a while. You can't just.
That was a perfect segue because it got me to mention my mentors. And a little bit about this seminar. It's called the Dental Ownership Summit. And kind of the little underscore tagline there is paths and strategies for new and aspiring dental owners. And there's going to be a little bit of multi-practice talk in there too, but primarily it's for the first-time owner, new grad who's student loan ridden, who the associate who's not ready to make that jump, just wants more information. I put it together because I was reading a lot on Dental Town. I was hearing a lot from my buddies who just graduated with big student loan debts. Just a lot of misinformation, lots of fear. Questions such as on Dental Town, like, is dentistry even still worth it as a profession? How do we get rid of these, student loan debts? I need to associate and pay them all off before I spend money for the practice. Then I get calls from my buddies. It's like, well, how do you know all this information? We graduated from the same spot, blah, blah, blah. So I put it together because of that. And what I did was reach out to my mentors, the people who helped myself and Dr. Little put together Southern Dental Group. And, I spent hours and hours and hours researching and listening to podcasts and going to their seminars and emailing them and picking the brains to gather all this information. And I thought, well, it would be special if I could get all these people in one spot, talk about the things that have made them successful, talk about the things that help new owners really get their careers off to a great start, get rid of that fear of and the risk associated with practice ownership, because that's how we combat corporate chains. That's how we combat high student loans and insurance companies pushing us down. We maintain private practice ownership, on-site equity owner doctors that take control of their businesses, that are knowledgeable on the things that make a good practice, and that still treat their patients like their family and do the very best work they can. A good mix of clinical CE, a good mix of business CE, understanding your practice. So I put this together because I wanted those guys to come. I didn't feel like there was anything out there that really, really talked about that. And to get these, those three are just the kind of names. Jonathan, you're going to be there to be able to answer questions about dental CPAs, and what services you can provide to help the on-site owner kind of get these corporate level metric tracking and benefits. My partner is going to be there to talk about transitioning practices. We got Dr. Silverman, who's a lecturer all over the United States on dental insurances and mistakes that are made with early practice owners and filing. We got Rob Bay from Dental Intel to talk about the metrics that corporate chains really watch, those KPIs that can kind of really have a high return on investment if you look at them closely and really watch those specific numbers. So we're getting together this wealth of information to present, and it's gonna feel a lot like a how-to guide, a walkthrough of, okay, I'm ready to be a practice owner. How do I read financial reports? How do I know what practice is right for me? Should I do a startup? Dr. Luna's going to talk about it. Talk about demographic reporting. Talk about the benefits of startups. Talk about how to make those startups marketable. Okay, now I know if I'm going to buy or start up. How do I transition that practice? Dr. Little, my partner, is going to walk you through it. How do I sign up for insurances? How do I sign up for payroll? How do I get legal? How do I be lendable to a bank? We're going to have a banker there to talk about how to make yourself lendable. All the things that go into buying a practice and then transitioning for that first year, we're going to talk about from some of the world-renowned minds in that industry. So I'm super excited about it, as you can probably tell from me rambling on. But
me
it's
too,
going to
man.
be a really, really great event.
Yeah, I think you're being a little bit humble in saying that it's mostly for the new docs. I absolutely believe it is. You created it for the new docs. I have a feeling that the owner docs are going to have they would learn way more than they think at something like this with the people that are there and knowing the A games that all these guys can bring. The value is just going to be through the roof. So when are the dates for this, and how do people sign up for it?
So we're doing it February the 16th and 17th, which is just in a few short weeks, and we're going to do it at Breakaway headquarters in San Antonio, Texas. They were generous enough when I reached out to Dr. Luna to kind of be a speaker at the event. He offered up Breakaway practice seminars as the I guess logistical host. He was so excited about the event and what the content can bring. So we're doing it there, San Antonio Breakaway headquarters on February 16th and 17th. If you go to breakawaypractice.com/dental ownership summit, there'll be kind of more information about the speakers and lecturers and where to stay with Hotel Valencia right there on Riverwalk, buses to transport us to and from the seminar venue. We're going to feed lunch a couple days and then have a social on Thursday night, which is the 16th evening. That'll give kind of more information. And then to register, you go to breakawaypractice.com, go to the seminar page, the registration page, and you kind of just got to scroll down there. We'll probably be near the top now that we're getting close, but you'll see the Dental Ownership Summit on there, something that you can add to your cart, 16th and 17th of February to get registered. Or you can always reach out to me, Hunter A. Smith, DDS @gmail.com, and I can get you registered just through Breakaway. Would be whichever of those options. One thing we're really, really excited about is we got all of these guys together. Dr. Friend, Dr. Costas, Dr. Luna, Dr. Silverman, Dental Intel, all these guys, you're going to be there we got all this together for less than $1,000 entry fee.
That's pretty amazing. You could have cost of admission just to see one of those guys.
Exactly. And it was really important to me. That's one of the first things I put in the email when I was reaching out to who I wanted to lecture. Like, look, you're all reward renowned. You're worth $1,000 on your own. Our target audience here is guys that are already scared to take that next step. We don't want to make cost of attendance an issue. To get it under $1,000 blew my mind when Breakaway got back with me and told me that that's what the cost is. I was really excited about it. I know it's a chunk of change. I promise you're going to get the content out of it. You're going to have a referenceable manual for the rest of your career that teaches you how to buy practices and changes even to make in your practices.
Perfect. Well, Dr. Smith, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, that's February 16th and 17th. You're probably going to want to get there on the 15th in order to be able to be there on the 16th, unless you got a really early flight coming in. Sorry, we're getting this out kind of late. It just kind of popped into my head. Hey, I need to get him on here to talk about this since we're going to be there. It's going to be an event for the ages. Go to, again, Breakaway Practice, or is it Breakaway? Yeah, Breakaway. I had breakawaypractice.com /dental ownership summit. And you can actually just go to the main page and go to the featured events, and it's on the upcoming events page as well. That's how I found it. But guys, go out there, register, come on by. I'll be there. We can hang out, have fun. And believe me, I am. Okay, I may not be a blast, but I'm sure Dr. Hunter is a blast to hang out with, so he'll be there. So guys, Take it easy. Thank you, Dr. Smith, again for coming on, and have a great week.
A very special thanks to Dr. Smith for providing such incredible insight on his path to building a thriving dental practice. As you heard, acquiring a practice can be really tricky, but when done right, can truly take your practice to the next level. So if you've enjoyed today's conversation and you need the tools and insights to execute your acquisition goals, you'll definitely want to learn more about the Dental Ownership Summit, where a handful of the most successful practice owners will be sharing their insights, tips, and keys to how to acquire a practice successfully. Now, to learn more, simply text practice to 33444. Again, if you want to learn more about this event, text the word practice to 33444 or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the U.S. You'll also receive updates on the latest episodes of Start Your Dental Practice, helpful tips for owning and running a practice, and promotional opportunities direct to your inbox. Now, guys, again, I'm going to stress this. This summit for this session is February 16th and 17th of 2017. We're only a few weeks out right now, so you guys really need to get on this if you're wanting to join this event. I don't know if they're going to be able to get this lineup again, ever again. This may be the last time these guys even get in the same room to share these types of insights and keys. So get out there, come on down to San Antonio, and if you do come in, shake my hand, say hi. So again, to learn more about that, simply text practice to 33444. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you liked the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.